Welcome to the Rise and Form podcast with your hosts, Abe Hatch
and Andrea Paxton. Here we have relatable discussions about the psychology of change and spiritual formation.
All right, let's go.
Cool.
Well, hey, listeners, Abe here.
And Andrea. We should just check in with each other. How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you.
I know. We can see each other. No one can see us, but we can see each other.
That's true. And we just wanted to introduce the episode today. We have Nijay Gupta, and we thought it would be really important to have an episode on what Christian spiritual formation is.
Right. It's like literally in our name, and we think it's important that people know what it is. It's important for us to know what it is, and we were really inspired by Nijay's definition and discussion about it, so we're excited to get into it.
Yeah. Okay. Today, we are thrilled to introduce an award-winning author, blogger, speaker, and New Testament teacher, Dr. Nijay Gupta. Nijay is a professor of New Testament at Northern Seminary. He has authored several books, including Worship That Makes Sense to Paul, Paul in the Language of Faith, and his latest book titled Strange Religion, among others, which is making a lot of headway and headlines right now. His scholarly work also includes numerous articles in academic journals, like the Journal of the Study of the New Testament and the Catholic Biblical Quarterly, and a wildly popular podcast called Slow Theology with Dr. A.J. Swoboda, which I like for many reasons, but especially the intro music at the beginning. So it's great to have you here, Nijay.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Yes, we're happy. It's so funny as Abe was reading like the different books that you've written, and I know these are only a few, but quite a few on Paul. And one of the episodes that I listened to, you were talking about Paul. Like, Paul is your guy, so
Yeah. Usually New Testament scholars, we choose a lane, and I chose Paul. I dabble in other things. I've written on the Lord's Prayer, but I'm with Paul.
Yes. You're with Paul, Team Paul. I love it. Well, let's just start with finding out maybe a little bit about a formative experience or moment that profoundly shaped who you are.
I was thinking about this morning because you were so gracious to give me the questions in advance. And, there's so many directions I can go in. But, I got to say, having kids, I have 3 kids. I do have a wife, Amy. We could talk about her later. She's amazing. And definitely marriage shapes you. But having kids is a whole other thing because you go from being a child to an adult immediately and having to care for this being or beings. And their life is in your hands. And if they need therapy later on, that's usually your fault and all that stuff. So I think having kids is, I know it's not everybody's experience and they're single people by choice or not. But having kids is it's gonna form you in really key ways.
Isn't that real? Man, kids will humble you. They will pull it all out. It's like, dang, I did not... Like, even to a higher degree than than marriage. Because marriage did that to me, too. Yeah. And then I had my daughter, and I was like, oh, my gosh.
It's like the most joyous, wonderful thing, and it's also the hardest and can be the most heartbreaking thing and frustrating thing you experience. Yeah. But those are sort of the extremes of life you get in a family.
Yeah. I'd love to hear more, Nijay, but we shouldn't just surprise you with follow-up questions on how parenting's been for you. But, that's kind of like the counselor in us or the therapist in
You're
us.
Like, explore that.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just juicy, isn't it, that topic? Like, it's so true. It's so formative.
Well, we have a child going to college. And you get really nostalgic, and you get, we've been listening to this wonderful artist, Noah Kahn. I'm sure you've heard of Noah Kahn. But Noah Kahn has this great line where he's talking about a parent letting their kid go to college and kind of sending them off into the world. And there's a great line, "You're the greatest thing we've lost." Man, that'll just rip your heart right out.
Oh, my gosh. I'm not even there. I'm like at kindergarten.
I don't want to think about that.
Don't think about it.
I can't even... Yeah, we'll have you back on in like 10 years. And you can prep us.
It's a date.
Yeah, right. I've heard it described like a slow breakup. It's like you're slowly over the years breaking up with your kid, and like,
Oh my
Well,
God.
hopefully they've come. I mean, in the song, and this is redemptive. There's the hope they'll come back. So,
yeah.
And
that's
the
good.
the chorus is, "We'll all be here forever." I mean, the parents, "We'll all be here forever. Just come back."
Oh, sad.
Well, we're talking about spiritual formation today, and of course, in Rise and Form, we're always trying to talk about some sort of cross section or some kind of meeting place between psychology and spiritual formation and Bible and religion and Christianity. And so, maybe we can go around almost like an icebreaker here and just talk about what religion meant to you growing up. And maybe an example of something that's been weird or funny or interesting in your learning experiences of what religion is in your Christian walk in church life.
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in a Hindu family. My parents are Hindu. They're immigrants from India. They came to the United States in the early 70s. I was born in the late 70s. And so I grew up with Hinduism until I was a teenager and became a Christian. And so religion in the younger years was pretty much tradition. It was ethnic tradition. It was cultural tradition. You went to the temple. You had religious ceremonies at weddings and at funerals. And it just felt like cultural trappings, just something you do because you're part of a specific ethnic group. Into my Christian years, age 16 and plus, I mean, it's completely different when you convert to Christianity. Religion was a lifeline. It became the thing that gave me hope in life, and we can talk about that later. You asked for an anecdote, something weird. I'll mention a couple things, one kind of fun and good, and one kind of weird and very weird. So the good thing would be I was introduced to foot washing, so I became a Christian in the Grace Brethren tradition, which is a conservative Anabaptist group. And some things I don't love about it and some things I do love about it. One thing I love is that we did foot washing 3 or 4 times a year where we'd be at a special event. We'd break up into men and women. And we'd go into this room where there were basins and water, and you'd sing hymns and wash each other's feet as a token of the imitation of Jesus and of the humility of Christ. And man, powerful, touching each other's feet, cleansing each other. It's humbling to do it. It's humbling to receive it. It's intimate. You're touching feet. There's lint, and people's feet aren't always clean, and there's socks everywhere and shoes everywhere. And gosh, I wish we did things like that or the equivalent to things like that in more Protestant churches and other churches. Something weird. I encountered a King James only prophet in college, and he was very convincing, and I bought into it for a while, very short while, like 2 weeks. But he had all these arguments about why the NIV is evil and corrupt, and man, there's a group of us that were kind of hooked in, and he was very convincing. He bought us chicken nuggets at Wendy's and gave us his spiel.
There it is.
Yeah, there it is. And man, we went to our youth pastor and we're like, "What's going on?" And then he's like, "Oh, so you've discovered the King James only." And he was able to talk us back from that. But we were just about ready to burn our NIVs.
Oh no!
Wow.
Yeah, we were so close.
Wow.
All you needed was chicken nuggets. Pull me in.
Wendy's.
Yes, the Wendy's brand. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of Bible gal are you, Andrea? I don't think I know this about you.
I like so this is fun. So I've done English Standard Version, but I actually like NIV better.
Yeah.
And I found this version on the Bible app where they do it to lo-fi hip hop music, and they speak the, I think it's NIV.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, actually, or it might be, anyways. Let's say it's NIV, and they do that. And so I listen to it just oh yeah, yeah, Jesus.
The pairing of the music, like the Dwell app. I'm I go for the cello now.
Oh.
Just that kind of, I don't know, especially when I'm in the Old Testament.
Yes, yeah, you just
yeah.
Okay.
How about you, Abe?
I mean, I grew up in Perth, Western Australia during quite a Pentecostal movement. And so my pastor was Frank Holmgren, who served at Oral Roberts for a while as like the prophetic advisor to Oral Roberts. Really just like as soon as we learned about Gandalf, we were like, that's who he is. He's Gandalf.
Oh, no. That's a good thing, though.
Yeah, in a good way. Like, yeah. So we had a very it was just weird being a kid, like in that environment, watching all sorts of stuff happen. But when I got into youth, and this would probably be my idea, so that's what religion was. It was like hanging around for 2 hours after the church is over because everyone's all wobbly from being drunk in the Holy Spirit. And my mom, literally waiting for my mum to sober up so she would be able to get us home. And
wow.
Okay. And no alcohol. There was no alcohol. It was just
pure spirit.
Strange. And and then when I'm in youth group, like in the sort of like must have been my early 2000s, one memory that comes to mind is being at youth camp, and I was the drummer, and it was just like, Abe, just like go crazy for like an hour. And so if I think about it now, if there was any videos of those experiences, it would have just sounded like someone just going nuts on the drums at like 10:30 at night while like, people are seeking God or something. And so I don't know how to make sense of that now, because there's been a lot of change since then in my spiritual walk. But that's what religion was. It was like, and I think one of the elements of it was a lot of effort, like just striving to find God, and striving to sort of meet him. And which I think, Nijay, somewhere this is reminding me of you talking about how the Romans were tried to do something impressive to find God. It's probably in your latest book.
Yeah. I think lots of ancient people had this experience. It comes down to your perspective on who God is. And if God is distant and uninterested, then you really have to clamor and bang to get God's attention. And so you have, for example, the Elijah and the prophets of Baal, and the prophets of Baal are, screaming and cutting themselves and do all this stuff to get their God's attention. The Romans had a similar mentality of a lot of pomp and a lot of theater in order to kind of entertain the gods into being gracious. And Jesus just says, you don't have to do any of that. God's already in a good mood because of Jesus anytime he comes to you or anytime you come to him. And so just say with basic, simple words what you want, and your Father will hear from heaven over the Sermon on the Mount. It's, oh, really? Is that it? I don't have to, do a big
45-minute drum solo.
You don't have to do that, Abe. You could put those drumsticks down and just say, thank you, Jesus.
That's relieving. That's relieving.
I relate with that, with just this striving. I think that's what religion was for me. Striving, very legalistic, following rules, and almost like a cause and effect. I grew up in more of like a prosperity gospel background, and it was like, do this and then this will happen. And so it was very much just like, okay, you do this and then this, A plus B, and just feeling like way too much power for anything happening. And I definitely going to school has helped. At Biola really helped to kind of like shape that. But that's what I thought it was, and that's a really stressful way to live and to feel like you have more power than you actually do in the spiritual realm. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if I have as much of a funny story connected with that. I mean, oh gosh, I don't want to take too much. I had another story that was just silly, not even silly. It was just more sweet, just show like the innocence of my heart. Because I also had this innocence of like, oh, I just love God.
Totally.
And just like, I remember one Christmas I had this like Christian song that I liked, and I made a dance to it, and I like shared it with my family, and I was just like had a little like outfit to go with it, and I was just like so just like there was this fire in me too, And I think that has, is still there, that genuineness.
Yeah.
Rather, I'm not going to say fire like I'm like, because I'm not that, but, that genuineness is there. And so.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's true. It's like a lot of it is genuine, isn't it? It is a fire and a heart, and it, like, for me, I wasn't theatrics. I was like, really, I think that, it makes sense, doesn't it? And not that we've figured it all out now, and we understand it now and all of that, but glad we've got you, Nijay, to help us.
I'll straighten
you out. Well, maybe we can go into the question of, what is spiritual formation and what is it not?
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of a buzzword, and overall, it's a great thing, but it can be watered down or used in the wrong way. So, I was snooping around on like official definitions. I didn't find anything I really loved, but the concept is really basic. And the way I love to explain it is like, I'm always trying to get healthy. I'm always trying to get fit. I'm always trying to exercise more. And I love the phrase out of shape. When we say, I'm out of shape, I need to go to the gym. I love that phrase because it assumes there's an ideal shape. Like, we're all different. Some of us are tall, some of us are shorter, some of us don't have hair. But there's this idea that for me and for you, there's an ideal shape physically, right? Your doctor will tell you that. Like, we're not all going to be the same BMI. We're not going to all be the same, weight. But for me, there's an ideal physical form that's going to be the healthiest. It's going to be a range, but it's going to be the healthiest, and I'm not there, right? And I think, in terms of who we are as believers and who we are in our relationship with God and our relationship to the world around us, there's actually an ideal. Like, that is so crucial just to know from the beginning. It's not an anything goes. It's not like do whatever feels best. We all know just the recklessness of that idea. This idea of going from out of shape to in shape. We can apply that to who we are in Jesus and say, there's actually an ideal. And what is the ideal? To be formed into the image of Christ according to who we're meant to be. Like, I'm not going to be Andrea, I'm not going to be Abe, but I'm supposed to be the me that Jesus wants me to be that reflects him. I don't think anyone, maybe they taught me that when I was a teenager, but maybe I just didn't pay attention, I guess. But that was never really hit home for me. And here's what I think the problem is. Many people like me received a Christianity that's static. It's a binary of saved or not saved. And then once you're saved, it's kind of a free-for-all. It's just sort of like, if I choose to improve myself, like, that's just kind of like beautifying myself. But I really don't have to, because like I'm just a believer and I go to heaven. But if I want to grow in my faith or read the Bible more, memorize scripture, it's just kind of like icing on the cake. And man, over the last 20 years, I have really gone through a deeper understanding of scripture and God's plan that is, this is not a choice. It's not a choice to be formed in the image of Christ. I love the phrase from, this kind of dates me in terms of my origins, but this is from Shawshank Redemption, get busy living or get busy dying. I love that because there's no neutral. We don't ever like put a pause on our growth. Like, I'm going to stop aging and just take a long nap. It's like either you're doing things that are going to make you healthier or you're going to do things that are going to kill you faster. It's sobering and it's even a little macabre to say that, but it's just true. It's just true. You're either, when if I mention my kids, we're constantly telling them, you got to set yourself up for success. Like, you can't have these years back. And so where I turn to in scripture is the idea that when we're born into Adam, as Paul says in 1 Corinthians, we're in Adam. When we're born into Adam, we're created with a design flaw. Like, think about a stamp that's broken, and no matter how many times you're going to stamp it, it's going to stamp wrong. And so we are kind of attracted like a magnet to the wrong ways of living. That doesn't mean everybody always does the wrong thing, but it means that we have a bent to us that's going to put us on the wrong path. I mean, this is why most of us become Christian, is because we realize I'm broken and I need to be fixed. And it's the people that don't figure that out that don't really get who Christ is, right? And then the alternative is to be in Christ. Either we're going to be in Adam or we're going to be in Christ. And Romans tells us the goal is to be conformed to the image of the Son. So we're going to be bent and broken and misshapen, and we're going to screw our own lives up and the lives of other people unless we start down the path of becoming more and more like Jesus. This is what new creation is about. And I'll tell you a recent analogy that's helped me to kind of get the ball rolling. We can follow up on that more. But I was asked to give a presentation at a conference recently on the crisis of Christian immaturity in our age. And they invited scholars from different disciplines: psychology, sociology, philosophy, historical theology, and I was Bible. And I thought, okay, I'm going to look up the texts in Paul that have to do with immaturity and maturity. And guess what? It's actually everything. I thought it was going to be like, a little bit of Romans, a little 1 Corinthians, they'll sprinkle a little bit. And it ended up being everything. Everything that Paul talks about has to do with immaturity and maturity.
Wow.
This is his preoccupation in all of his letters. Does he talk about salvation? Yeah, but he's writing to believers, so that kind of is an issue that he's already dealt with in the past. The majority's letters are really dealing with... read 1 Corinthians. I'm translating through 1 Corinthians right now, and I mean, Paul's just kind of like, guys, stop being idiots. Like, just stop what you're doing. You're just not getting it right. I mean, it's he spends 16 long chapters basically saying, you guys just need to stop whatever you're doing. You're doing it completely wrong. So let me tell you the analogy that's really helped is in a couple of places in his letters, in Galatians and Ephesians, he talks about, and Romans, he talks about becoming, growing up into the new man or putting on Christ. And he's actually drawing from, most scholars agree that he's drawing from something called the toga ceremony in the Roman culture. So Roman citizens, males, when you're a male child, you're considered a child, you're considered a non-adult until your father thinks that you're now ready to be an adult. It's usually around that 14, 15, 16 stage. It's not set in stone. The father discerns it and it happens. And then you go through a toga ceremony where you have a youth, almost like a training toga. It's called the toga praetextus, which is your pre-adult yoga. That's too Portland for you. Pre-adult toga. Your toga, which is like a training. It's like a training jersey, it's training toga. And then you take that off and you put on the toga virilis, which means you're now an adult. And a few interesting things about that. One is it's actually your whole goal in life is to grow up to be ready to be an adult. Children in the Roman world, they don't exist to be children. They exist to be adults. Not everything that happened in the Roman world was good for children. But I like this idea that you're a human in training until you're an adult. And your goal is to train and to discipline and to exercise your mind and your body to become an adult. And here's the kicker. It's not just to be an adult to be an adult. It's to be an adult to be a contributing member to society. So there were three things in the Roman world that was important for. Number one, to get married and to contribute to family life. To have children, contribute to family life. Number two, to participate in civic affairs like helping out with voting, or with like, I'm going to volunteer to work in the treasury or to help out with the local sports games. And number three, to fight in war, to support and defend communal identity. Now, of course, Rome was out there killing people. I don't support all that. But this idea that the point of being a child was to grow up into an adult, and the point of being an adult was to contribute to the community as one part of a whole body. Right? That is completely... I mean, I just did this research in the last 6 months, 9 months. It's completely changed how I've read the Bible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because I used to think of spiritual formation as an iterative practice. Spiritual formation is like, almost like brushing your teeth. Like, I brush my teeth because my teeth are dirty. And they need to be brushed. But the way that Paul and Jesus and others view spiritual formation is there's an identifiable goal to your being. And we need to set that target, which is Jesus Christ, who I'm meant to be in Jesus Christ. And then we need to take the appropriate pedagogy, paideia, training, steps to get there. So what I said at this conference was, because they said, how do we fix this? I said, when you become a Christian, someone needs to sit down with you and say, you need to get from point A to point B. And we need to create a plan for how you're going to get there. And it may not take a month, and it may not take a year. It may take 10 years, it may take 20 years, it may take 50 years. But that's your goal from now until you die. And that's, I mean, it's not this sort of like, oh, spiritual formation, I want to go to the Bible so I can grow in my faith. I tend to see that as like iterative. Just do it when you can, as often as you can, and it's good for you, like brushing your teeth or flossing. But this idea that like you will die unless you set yourself on the goal to be like Christ, the person you're meant to be in Christ. And this should be your fixation for your whole life. It's a completely different thing. And that has completely changed how I look at Scripture.
That is huge. I feel like, goodness, we could just like linger on that. But what I'm hearing is like, it's not helpful to have this binary, like you're saved or you're not. Like that shouldn't be the goal, you know, but we should be pursuing growing into the image of Christ. We should be that is the end goal. And we're not there, and we won't be there. We'll always be pursuing that, but there's always should be this where it's like, I feel like there's so many more words I want to say, but I really like that image, like our goal in life. And I agree. I think that when we do get saved, I think it would be important to really know, like, one, what are we getting into? You know, and what does this actually look like? Like, this isn't, oh, now I'm a good person. Oh, now I'm on the good team. It's like, no, this means you're actually signing up to do something.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I didn't grow up with sports. My parents wanted me to focus on school. I'm a good Indian that way. But my kids are really into sports, and my wife is really into exercise and sports. So I've learned a lot about sports in the last 20 years, the last 15 years. And I used to think sports was a complete waste of time. I used to think it's just entertainment. It's making so much money, but it's not worth all that money. And there are some bad things about, you know, the sports entertainment culture. But with my kids and like school sports, especially during the pandemic, it was so crucial to have coaching. It was so crucial to have teamwork, self-discipline, all that stuff. And, you know, when my son is, you know, training to be on the soccer team for the high school, he's going to have tryouts here coming up. And like when I exercise, it's kind of like I'm doing the elliptical machine while watching a movie, and I'm not sweating because I'm not working very hard. And, you know, like my watch is like time to move. And I'm like, I am moving. Like I'm not really doing a whole lot when I'm exercising. I'm kind of just doing it because I know it's good for me and I know I should, but I'm not really pushing myself. I'm not really getting better at it. Like I still do the same 25-minute exercise routine. Whereas with my son, I'm like, okay, they want you to be able to run 2 miles in under 14 minutes. Like you have to do this to get on the, you know, they'll have specific goals for his position in soccer. They'll have specific training regimens to get better to form into the particular kind of player they want for the team. And that idea of, and it's not works righteousness when it applies to Christianity, if you understand the get busy living or get busy dying mentality. This is for your health. This isn't to check boxes or to make God happy. It's because you were designed to contribute to society in a very specific way with your giftings and as a human being. And you're not going to get there by just doing Nijay's 25-minute elliptical routine. You're not going to get there that way. And,
that sounds fun, though.
Yeah.
I get to watch a lot of movies that way. But this idea, like changing from Nijay's exercise routine to my son's or my daughter's exercise routine is the difference between exercising for the sake of exercising and training for the sake of becoming the right person to fit the team. Because I want to fit the team the way the team wins, the way the team is designed to win. And the win isn't salvation. It's about running the world in the way the world was meant to run.
Yeah, I'm having some like cognitive dissonance about this because, and I think it's because of where like I'm at and where maybe Rise and Form's at with trying to understand this concept, right? And you said mindset in there, so I think it's good to just sort of understand the complexity of that mindset.
Yeah.
Because we are human and we always end up going to, okay, so if I have to get ready, if I have to just get busy with living, then I better just like make sure my whole life is dialed in, right? With all of these things. Then we lose the heart, right? Well, we lose this is about really living out a life that is worthy of the call and a life that's in step with Jesus. And so I'm just wondering if you can speak a bit to that. And it's sort of like going a bit off script here, and it's interesting because I just got that email from John Tyson this morning, and he talked about spiritual formation in one of his emails just today. And it was sort of the same kind of thing that you're saying here, Nijay, about he's a little worried that it's become about kind of like, just do these lovely things every day.
Right.
And do your Shema 3 times, and do your, whatever it is, practice gratitude. And it's a little passive. And he was like, it's not meant to be like that. And I thought, oh man, here we go again. Like, because we've been going to this, like, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And now we're going to, so yeah, I think you know where I'm going with this. But yeah, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it can't be, it shouldn't ever be anxiety producing in the sense of, is this going to make God happy? In that sense. So I always go back to the image of the church as a family and God as parent. And I never, ever, ever want my children to wonder whether what they're doing pleases me to the point of whether I kick them out or not. Right? That'd be terrible. But they know what it's like when I'm saying, you're doing the right things to make me proud in terms of being selfless, being generous with other people, being forgiving, right? I want them to get good grades, but I'm not going to make it a matter of kicking them out of the family. So there's a difference between pleasing your parent because you want to be like them, because you know they're doing the right things in being human, and the difference between striving and struggling to get your parents' attention by getting good grades or doing well in sports or being a good person or whatever it is. But I hear what you're saying about kind of the active versus the passive. I may be getting ahead, but you wanted to talk about certain practices. I actually hesitate to tell people specific practices because I think it's more about what you're aiming your life at. And then the practice should be formed around your context, your community, your traditions, your people. And I don't want to recommend a one-size-fits-all. I think for the reasons, Abe, that you're kind of saying of like, people will check a box. Like, I spent 30 minutes with the Bible today. It's not about how much you read. When I was in high school, I tried to read through the whole Bible as fast as I could. And now I'm spending more time on just meditation, more time on just meditating on one verse. More time just slowing down and just enjoying time with God. And because I was in that sort of works mode in high school of doing things for Jesus, and going back to the sports analogy, my favorite sport's soccer, so I use a lot of soccer illustrations. But if a team is playing 3 games in a week, you're gonna have to rest players. You're gonna have to bench players. Sometimes your best players. And so rest is a crucial part of growth. And not resting is a huge detriment to growth. But it's not about certain practices. It's really about understanding the dynamics of your life and what's going to get you to the end goal. So if someone came to me and they said, I really want to grow in my faith, how can I do it? I would spend the majority of the time of that first year, first month, just getting them down on what the goals are and what the dangers are. Right. If it's sports, I'm like, okay, we want to win, but we want to win the season. We don't want to win the next game. Like, we want to win the season. So that means you got to create the right training. You're not going to tear your ACL or your Achilles, that sort of thing. And then what are the dangers? Like, the dangers, you're going to get too interested in press conferences and you're going to get too interested in this. You want to warn people of that. But the practices will come through people that know your body, your spirituality, your needs, your growth. what's going to be best. It's going to be sometimes changing it up, things like that. So I wrote a few things down. I don't know if this will, help us or hurt us.
I love the correction on not having something specific and prescriptive to us. Thanks for doing that, because I think
freeing.
we need it. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Well, the problem is we compare so much, and we think, I'm not reading the Bible as much as Andrea, and therefore, I'm not as holy, and then it starts to be comparative, and that's so dangerous.
Yeah.
I do think virtue approach is helpful, but virtues and habits, but what habits they are, they might change over time. And sometimes you do need a little bit of a break, and you do need a little break or routine and change it up. But I'll just mention some things in terms of how to get us on the right track. A key part for me, and you guys will know this way better than I do, but a big part is taking the time for self-examination. I mean, I'm sure a big part of your job is teaching people self-examination, but I spent the first 25 years of my life not really looking inside, right? Not popping the hood and looking at how the parts are working. And I think it was
engine light.
If I'm successful, then I must be healthy. And I was very successful and very unhealthy. I was very successful on worldly metrics, but very, very unhealthy. And you're just bound to crash and burn then. And you're bound to take other people down with you. And so a key part of my spirituality, and this came at great cost of having an anxiety attack that put me in the hospital, of having major career crisis stuff, other health stuff, is just taking the time to slow down, and with God and hopefully with trusted other people, just cautiously and graciously look under the hood and say, what's broken? How's everything working? And, the biblical writers like Paul would talk about this as mortification. There's some things in my life that I'm going to have to say goodbye to. That's what they called self-mortification, being crucified to the world crucified to me. Yeah. Some things that I really like, some sins that I really love, some insecurities that I've really clung to and have become crutches. I'm going to need to say goodbye to those things. And it's not going to happen right away, but I'm going to need some help, and I'm going to have to say goodbye, because I'm going to be healthier without them, even though I've used them for 20, 30, 40 years. A key part of that, I'll add another one, is let other people in. So many ministry leaders are successful and continue to thrive in an external sense on their natural talent, but they've succeeded in hiding the brokenness inside by sheltering themselves from other people. I say this often to the new students I teach, their seminary students, that pastors are some of the loneliest people in the world. Because their external success is predicated upon protecting their image and protecting people from seeing any brokenness inside of this. So I encourage people listening, it's time to let people in. If you're at a place where you need to look at what's broken, you're going to need some help. You're going to need to let other people in. I'm going to give you a quote that's helped me, and then we can open it up to you guys. Give me some free therapy. This is John Newton, and I love this, and I've used this a lot, and it's a shortened version of the quote. I'm not who I ought to be. I'm not what I wish to be. I'm not what I hope to be, but by God, the grace of God, I am not what I was. And the Christian life is going to be a life of a lot of failure. Just that's the way we learn. We learn through failure. But we got to be able to take the long view and say, I have somewhere I want to go. I'm not there yet. I'm not even close. But gosh, if I look back, I can see I made it a long way.
Yeah.
Wow, Nijay, you dropped a lot of truth bombs there. Things that people are probably like, their brains are just like, what? Like, the Christian life is there's going to be failure. I should expect failure. Like,
it's built in.
It's built in. Like, I should, expect that I'm going to have to say goodbye to some things. My heart is gravitating to things that aren't healthy, but I like it. It feels right. No, I have to let go of, all these ways of just this countercultural way of thinking of things, but I think it's so helpful and so sobering. And like, again, it's like we just need a whole like a course on like, this is what you're signing up for.
Yeah. Well, I was just meditating today on Jesus's teaching about the house built on the sand and the house built on the rock. And what's interesting, it's interesting once you really dive into a text thinking about what Jesus could have said. Because he could have said, move your shoddy house to a place with no bad weather. But he doesn't say that because he knows the flood and the hurricane are going to come. Jesus takes for granted that your life is going to be battered by a hurricane and an earthquake. Yeah. So it's like when we first become Christians, someone should sit down and say, there's a hurricane and earthquake coming. You guys live in Oregon, as I just learned when we started, and we are due for 8 or 9 point magnitude earthquake in the next 50 years. And,
oh my gosh, I'm moving.
Wanda Fuca tectonic plate. And so there's all this retroseismic fitting going on. And this idea that, no one told me when I first became a Christian, you need to be ready for an 8 point magnitude earthquake. You need to ready your soul for an 8 point magnitude. Had someone done that, I would have lived my Christian life completely differently. And maybe they did and I didn't listen, and maybe that's the problem.
Yeah.
But this is what we need to tell people. It's not going to be easy. It never was. No one said it was going to be easy. Yeah. But this is the only path to becoming really human.
And the slow leak, right? Like it's the earthquake, and then just the mini failures every day, like the small, which I think it gives me hope to hear that, that I will have little failures along the way, but they don't define my whole journey. And like you were saying, it's about trajectory, or it's not about the position you are now, but how far you've come. And hopefully that's somewhere further, right? Hopefully there's been some progress in some way towards maturity, like what you were saying Paul was really talking about, not necessarily some metric that we like to measure by, but some sort of maturity, which I think is like things of character, right? Like those things of I forgave that person, or I persevered, and or I was patient with someone when I'm not usually patient, or whatever it is. There's these common factors in psychology that are measures that across any type of modality, they're meant to be the things that are the change agents. And as long as that's happening in the room with a client, those things, you're going to have some progress. And it's funny because we've really touched on them, which I'm like, wow, like, okay, psychology knows a little bit about this, probably through the back door kind of thing. But the reflection, like there has to be some capacity to mentalize or reflect on things. There has to be a common goal that you're being collaborative with someone in. There has to be that, and there has to be a safe therapeutic relationship. And it's like you were saying, that these are the things that we need in our Christian walk. So it's just interesting because I was thinking about that, of like, I don't think I have like goals in my formation. Like I don't think I have like necessarily some goals or some directions, except just like, I just want to be like Jesus. But it's so general.
John Mark Comer, you guys might know who that is, but he has said on several podcasts, I'm sure he says in his writings, that American evangelical churches aren't designed to help Christians grow in their faith. What a shocking thing for a pastor to say. But it's true because of the way we constructed it to get people in and out on a Sunday morning.
Yes.
We don't create the context to actually help people live their lives. We just create it as a drive-through. You come in, you eat your Big Mac, you lick your lips, and you leave. And
you get your Maverick City, and
and it tastes good and refreshing and delicious. And then you gotta have to deal with the fallout later. And so John Mark's been part of this thing called Practicing the Way, which tries to change the dynamics of Christianity to make it about growth. And even the language of growth, I've changed from talking about growing my faith to talking about being a grown up. Because you could grow from age 3 to 4 and you're not doing a whole lot.
That's true.
But say if the goal is to be a grown up, that's a completely different thing. And so how can we create churches that are actually going to do that for our souls and our bodies and our lives and our relationships?
Yeah, we need to start a revolution. I mean, there is one started.
It is starting,
one, yes.
But people don't like change. And there's so many Christians out there who don't want to be made uncomfortable with these hard conversations. I'm only saying that because I probably was one of those. If I would have heard this podcast as a 19-year-old, I would have been like, Skip, this is psychology mumbo jumbo.
No fun.
This is touchy feely. This isn't. I'm saved. And only through the hard knocks of life have I tried to now teach my children. Okay, you gotta be ready.
Yeah. I just wanted to, Nijay, since you talked about relationship, I wanted to ask a little bit about working with a spiritual director, because that is one way that we can have a relationship, someone that can kind of help guide us through the spiritual process.
Sure.
And I know in a podcast before you had mentioned that you do have a spiritual director. So just a little bit of insight of that experience.
Yeah, about 5-6 years ago, I went through a midlife crisis. I'm in my 40s. And I just kind of crashed and burned. I hit rock bottom. And a friend of mine, a couple of friends of mine, one of them is AJ Swoboda. He's like, you gotta, if you want some help, you gotta go to a spiritual director. I have this guy, and it'll change your life. And I was at the end of my rope. And so I rarely let people in other than my wife, but I knew I needed help. And so I signed up to meet with a spiritual director, and it was a game changer. But a spiritual director is basically a mentor, a Christian mentor who's going to help you focus your life and problems on the triune God in a one-on-one relationship. I mean, it sounds really basic, and it is really basic. These people are trained, hopefully, so find one that's trained. Yeah. And they're using often ancient practices. What often Catholics will appeal to the Ignatian spirituality practices of what I referred to in terms of self-examination, confession, and attunement to the Spirit of God. It's not rocket science. It's amazing. It's not rocket science, but you need help. And what we do is I meet with my spiritual director, and he's a friend, and we'll hug, and we'll talk about our personal lives. But as he asked me to share about what's going on in my life, and I've had a series of really difficult things that have happened to me in the last 5-10 years, he'll say things like, if Christ was sitting next to you, what would he be saying to you right now? And it just takes someone who is a mentor that you respect and love, a friend, to be able to ask those questions and for you to be able to give honest answers. You know, if you asked me at church, if I saw Audrey at church, she said, hey, what would Jesus say to you? I'd probably make something up. I'd say like the Christian answer. But with my spiritual director, I'm spending my time and effort and money to do deep soul work, and that's going to require my full honesty and vulnerability before him and before God. And so I'll say it. I'll say all the things I'm thinking, and he'll say, what's most broken about this? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? Now, I have to say, he's not a therapist, and it's important to know this isn't a professional therapy relationship. We'll have social time together. We'll go out to dinner, and all that sort of thing. We're close friends, and you don't always have those kinds of relationships with a professional counselor. My wife's a therapist, so I understand in a professional relationship, you might be dealing with really harmful personal matters that you need professional skills for as a therapist that a spiritual director usually doesn't have, and they'll refer out if you're dealing with a mental illness or dealing with personality disorder. So I just want to say right there, even though both a therapist and a spiritual director offer therapeutic help, there are differences between them that need to be recognized. But I will say it doesn't need to be a spiritual director. If you're listening, on this and you're thinking, oh, I want one of those, it could just be a close friend that's a mentor that can help you. And I think I needed somebody where we meet once a month for an hour. It's a protected time. It's someone that I respect their training. But I need that person that I can just be perfectly self-exposed and honest to. And I can cry and I can curl up in a ball on the couch.
Yeah.
But he'll bring out prayers. He'll light a candle. We'll be silent together. We'll be still together. You need those people, whatever kinds they are, to help you get through your life. You just need them.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I love that you shared that openly, and even the distinction that you made. Like, we can have both. You can have both, a therapist and a spiritual director. I've known people who have done that, but just the power of intentionally, like, really focusing in and just having someone intentionally guide you and be with you in your spiritual walk is really, really healthy.
Yeah. I mean, this, and every time I explain this to people, they think, shouldn't we all just do this for one another? And in an ideal world, we would. It would be something that we're trained for in the church, something that we can really do in and through the church. Until that day, we do have to sometimes go externally, like we do with clinical therapy. But I mean, in more simple ways, we could be helping each other out in this way of just being people that are good listeners, people that check in on people. Like, I have a pastor friend, and he checks in on me a lot. And he's not my pastor. But he checks in on me a lot. It's just a simple text of, how you doing? And he's one of those people where I can give him an honest answer. And I just texted somebody today, and I just shared an encouraging word. You know, you're one of Christ. You're one of Christ's beloved. I hope you'll live in that truth today. You know, just someone that I care about, who I'm not very close with. I wish we did that more. Like, we just cared about each other that way more.
Such a
we
good
just
reminder.
And I think we put on this shield of saying, I'm fine, the I'm fine shield. And even AJ said on our podcast, it's a dangerous thing to say I'm fine, because we're telling people that we have to pretend to be fine all the time. And Jesus just starts out the gospel that he preaches with saying, life's not going to be fine. So you just need to build a strong house, and other people can help you with that.
That's so good. Well, honestly, I'm fine right now, Nijay, and also just
thank you. Good.
So like
it is well with
impacted.
My soul.
That was just, thank you so much. I mean, I've just got so much to think about, and I think even for Rise and Form, just after 1 hour of sitting with you, we've got so much to like process and even just to direct ourselves in this way more. So we just appreciate all the work you've done, you know, both intellectually, but also in your soul and your character and your heart, because it just pours out like and it's just wonderful. So thank you so much. I hope we can come and watch you preach on Sunday.
Yes.
I was just preaching just now.
You were.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's right.
There were a couple times I wanted to say amen.
Yeah, that's right. Taking the highways and byways.
Yeah.